Welcome to the Life in Paradise podcast, the show about creating a life you never need a vacation from. You'll gain inspiration from those who have done it before as we share experiences, strategies, and offer practical steps you can take to live your dream life in paradise. With your host, attorney turned alchemist, Dawn Fleming.
Welcome to Taking Command with Captain Tom. I'm here with Tom Clifford, my husband, and we're going to talk about the law of navigation today.
So you want me to go ahead and get started?
Go ahead and get started.
Okay. I've been a sailor all my life since I was 14 years old, and learned how to navigate in the local waters in Southern California. So when we decided in 2010 that we were going to sail all the way from Southern California down to the Panama Canal up to Florida, we made the decision in 2004, and we prepared for 6 years for this trip. We had to get a bigger boat, and then we had to take and sail the boat all up and down the California coast and navigate the different areas in order to learn the boat and be prepared for this trip we were going to take. So it all comes to preparation and knowing the boat and knowing your course that you want to take. And we actually drove 500 miles north to San Francisco to go to a seminar on a group sail of 150 boats that sailed from Newport Beach, from San Diego, clear down to Cabo San Lucas, about 150 boats. And so we went the group sail first, and then we kept going from there down through Costa Rica, El Salvador, and down to the Panama Canal. But we went and we took notes, and we talked to the people who did it, and we learned what we needed to learn to make this journey and do it safely. And then even we were going to travel with pets. So Dawn even took a course on cruising with pets, so that we can be prepared for if one of our cats got sick on board. So we did a lot of preparation and effort, and we even went to captain's school, and that's where I got my education to get my captain's license, and it really came to an advantage. And when we're out in the middle of the night out in the ocean, and there's a freighter or a barge or something that was sailing in the dark, I could identify it by its lights and which direction it was going and things like that. So, yeah, we really prepared, and still, things happened, nothing bad. We got sick, but that was, it was nothing we could do about that. But one of the things in the planning and the preparation is so important, and make sure that all the systems are working correctly, and that you have two good radios on board and all that, because when you're out at sea, and if you're over 25 miles off a coast or out there, your regular radio doesn't reach that far. So you basically are on your own. You're your own little world, the world of Dawn and Tom and our sailboat, the Santorini. And so you have to rely strictly on your own good judgment when you're out at sea, and that's what the law of navigating is that you have to be prepared. You have to know and be prepared for whatever happens out there. One of the things for years before that, I was reading books. I was an international yacht racer. I crewed on big race boats and some of my own boats, and I would always get these books about these big offshore races where there was storm came up and boats were sunk and lives were lost and everything. And Don said, well, why do you read these morbid books about this? And I said, it's so that I can learn from their mistakes. This is what I would have done differently than them. So you really, even the disasters, you got to learn from them as well, because
And movies too.
And movies.
Remember The Perfect Storm?
Yeah.
You know, you're watching that and oh, they did this right and they did this and it would scare me to death.
Yeah.
He would read these books and he would tell me these stories about all these tragedies. And I said, oh my gosh, if I read these books, if I watched these movies, I'd probably never leave sight of the shore.
Yeah.
But it is great intel. Right. And even in your captain's course, they showed you movies, right? About disasters at sea and they explained why they happened. And so learning from other people's mistakes.
Yeah. And like where I was just talking to Donna a few minutes ago that navigating, anybody can, even an autopilot can drive a boat. It's that the captain who has to decide this is the best way to go. This is the safest way to go in these sea conditions. And weather conditions and everything. So there's a lot to. It's the leadership of your own little world. Basically, you have to be able to navigate how much fuel do you have, are the sails and everything in good shape, and you can be out in the middle of the night and a bad storm come up, and you have to be able to deal with it. You can't call rescue and stuff like that. So there was a lot of prep in it. So. The planning, the preparation, captain's license. I got a quick story about risk versus reward. I crewed and raced with a friend of mine that I went to high school with and had our first jobs together. And I raced with him for 40 years. And one time we were out, not that long ago, we were out on a Saturday off the coast of California. With a crew of 10 on a 41-foot race boat. And 4 of us, of the crewmen, were experienced racers. And Ray was the skipper. And there was 6 of them that were inexperienced. And we went out in this race offshore, and it was a full day, long race. And the weather got really bad. The wind really came up. It wasn't forecasted. And the seas got really rough. And so the inexperienced crew were a little bit freaked out. And so in one situation, 2 crewmen kind of went overboard. We grabbed them at the last minute, almost overboard. And so the rest of us, our experienced crew, we all looked at Ray, and Ray looked at me, and he says, "Hand me the radio." We were done. He called it into race control and said, "No, we're dropping out of the race. We're headed for the barn." And they said, "Do you need assistance?" And he says, "No, we're good, but we're headed for the barn." And it's risk versus reward. It wasn't worth risking crewmen over a glass beer mug. So it was one of the stories that you think about it. And this is, we were disappointed because we were leading the race in our class. And we said, no, this is not worth it. So you have to make those kind of decisions for your whole crew when you're out in the ocean. And we had crew at times, and I was responsible for them. If anything happened to them, it was my responsibility. So I had to show leadership the whole time. I could not really relax too much because it was, the onus was on me to be the leader and to get us from point A to point B safely without any bad issues that happened. But so that's one of the judgment calls you have to make in leadership. So
yeah, I think that leads right into the story of the 2 groups that were racing to the South Pole.
Yes,
back in the 1800s.
Yeah, in the 1800s, these 2 Amundsen, who was a Norwegian explorer, and the other one is Robert Scott, who was a British captain, and they were trying to race to be the first one to Antarctica, to the South Pole. And so the one fellow, the Norwegian, he decided to take dog sleds and go by dog sled when with the dogs are used to the cold, and he had big fur coats on. And they made it down there, and they didn't have too much trouble. They planned ahead for where they were going to go, and they had food stores set aside in different places to get down there. And they made it down there, and they put their flag on the South Pole. And then Scott,
and they made it back safely.
And he made it
right?
back safely. And Scott, he decided he was going to take these mechanical sleds that had early engines on them. They actually had a motor on it. and they were very big, heavy, cumbersome things. And they took horses too, and so the sleds broke down, and so
because of the cold,
because of the cold, and so the horses they didn't have very thick fur on, and so the horses froze to death. And pretty soon, the guys, the actual explorers, the expedition team, were pulling these 200-pound sleds over the ice, and they ran out of food, and they had frostbite. And by the time they actually made it down to the South Pole, there was the Norwegian flag, and they turned around and started to head back, and they all froze to death. So it was the risk wasn't worth the reward in that situation. But it was all planning, and everything had to do with how well the two different expeditions planned and how they figured it out. The leadership. They didn't make the right decisions. And I think it had a little bit to do with Scott was a British captain, and this other fella, Amundsen, was from Norway. He was Norwegian, where it's a lot colder. He was a lot
used
more
to the conditions.
Yeah, a lot more used to the conditions. So, but one thing that Scott went and thought, we'll just be courage. We'll be courage, and strong. Didn't work. The other guys, the Norwegians, they planned ahead, they figured it all out, and they executed their plan. They planned their thing, and they executed their plan. So that's a little story about risk and reward to lose your life and the life of all your expedition for something like that. If you're not planning, it doesn't fare well. But but it's all leadership and decisions you have to make as a leader.
We'll be back in a moment.
Isla Mujeres is a Caribbean jewel off the coast of Cancun. Castilito del Caribe warmly invites you to enjoy our spectacular oceanfront villa located in the heart of El Centro and a short walk to Playa Norte, which is ranked one of the top 10 beaches in the world. With an ocean view of crystal clear turquoise waters overlooking both the Caribbean and Cancun city skyline, we offer a fabulous location for you to enjoy all the peace and tranquility you're looking for on vacation, while also taking in all the excitement the island has to offer, with activities either in walking distance or a golf cart day excursion away. Please visit CastilitoCaribe.com, www.CastilitoCaribe.com. We look forward to seeing you soon.
I'm so happy to have you with me for the Life in Paradise podcast. I love our listeners and fans, and we'd love to show our appreciation for you supporting the show. So please head over to lifeinparadisepodcast.com, where you can find free resources mentioned in the show, and also register for our gifts, prizes, and swag. I'd also love to hear from you, so there's a place on that page to submit your questions, comments, and requests, so I can serve you better. And if I answer your question on the show, we'll send you a free gift. And we're back with Taking Command with Captain Tom. And we're going to continue our discussion about what it looks like when you don't properly plan.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things. When we after we sailed to the Panama Canal and went all the way up to Florida, we would sail down. We were planning on a sailing trip clear down here to Mexico. And so one of the things we did was we hired a meteorologist who plotted a course for us, because he knew where the Gulf Stream was at times. You had to cross the Gulf Stream, and you had weather patterns and as such. So we actually paid a meteorologist, a sailor, a guy who'd plot courses for people who wanted to sail long distance. And so he would give us all these waypoints, and we'd sail to those, and we would cross the Gulf Stream and in places where the Gulf Stream is wide and not so fast. And so we were very well prepared, and we would go to this waypoint, and then with our GPS, we'd find the next waypoint, and we'd head towards that. So it took all the guesswork out of it, and then he'd watch the weather patterns for us, and we could have weather updates and such, so that it took all of the guesswork out of it.
Well, and I might add, it was not intuitive. The way that we went was very different from what you and I would have selected, and very different from the course that we took from Isla to the States. Remember, we probably should have contacted him before we went on that trip.
Yes.
But we didn't know about him at that point.
No, we didn't know about him. We learned about him through a yacht club we belonged to. We'd go up to seminars.
Well, it was a sailing seminar.
Yeah, sailing seminar.
We go GLAM. Or GAM, they call it.
Yeah. But so we did that, and actually joined the Seven Seas Cruising Association, where we had cruising ports and ambassadors, where if we were off somewhere, we could find an ambassador who could answer questions for us if we needed mechanical repairs. So it came in quite handy.
Parts procurement.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing is that we just had some friends who acquaintances who went to pick up a boat in Jacksonville that they just bought. Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah. And so they says, well, have you gone up there and sailed the boat at all since you purchased? Oh no, we're just going to sail it down here. I kept my mouth shut because, you just do that sometimes. But I would never have done that with a little preparation. And they did not have a good sail. They had breakdowns. They had problems. They had no
electricity. So no lights. No refrigeration.
No. Yeah.
Fuel problems too, didn't they?
Yeah. And so they had a lot.
They left in very bad conditions. Yes. They were heading south with a strong south wind right on their head.
Yeah.
Going directly into the wind with very rough seas. Yeah. Plus into the Gulf Stream.
Yeah. So a lot of them, a couple of the guys couldn't make the trip. They had to get off the boat.
One of our dear friends has back problems, and after slamming for I don't know how many days it was, probably 3 or 4 days, they were heading into the wind, not making very much progress. Sure. He finally got off in Fort Lauderdale and flew back here because his body couldn't take the pounding that they experienced. And it was funny because I asked him, I said, why did you leave in those conditions? And they said, oh, well, because this other gentleman who had flown there, he was antsy and he wanted to leave.
Yeah.
He didn't want to wait, because they had flown there to sail the boat down. But either the weather conditions had changed or they weren't cognizant of what the conditions were at the time that they left, because no sailor in their right mind, experienced sailor, I think would have, regardless of what type of a boat, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, not just if you don't understand the power of the Gulf Stream, it's like for real, right? That's right. Like no BS experience to be in the Gulf Stream, especially if the wind is going the opposite direction of the way the Gulf Stream is flowing. In this case, it wasn't, but still, it was very strong. You want to comment on that?
Yeah. One of the other things, just real quick before I comment on that, is that the other thing is physical preparation of our own bodies. Because when you're in heavy seas, you have to hold yourself up. It's called your core strength. And when we sailed up from Cologne, from the Panama Canal up the Western Caribbean, the seas were huge. It was very rough, and it's like we were being in a car wreck. A car accident for 6 days and 6 nights solid. But if you didn't have good core strength, and we did because we were at sea for like 6 months, and so we're in good physical condition. But if you're not in good physical condition, the sea will hand you a beating. So that and also one of the things that happens when talking about the Gulf Stream is the Gulf Stream is going in one direction, and if the wind is going in the opposite direction, the seas get very treacherous. It can be, it can slam you. Once this situation is, normally we can do in a 24-hour period, with our sailboat, we can do about 150 nautical miles. And so in one 24-hour period, when we first left here to sail up there at one time, we made 180 miles. So we were pretty excited about making 180 miles in a 24-hour period. And then the storm came up, and the next unforecasted. And the next 48 hours, we only made 60 miles. Mm-hmm. So that was a terrible beating, and lightning around us everywhere, 360 degrees of lightning. But it was an unforecasted storm. But you have to be prepared physically and mentally to you can't turn around and some of the situations. And another people we know took another boat because it was a good weather window when it started, and they were headed for Texas, and their sail they weren't prepared well enough, and their sails all ripped. They lost their dinghy. They actually put their EPIRB, activated their EPIRB, which goes to the satellites, and it tells the Coast Guard that
it's emergency beacon.
Emergency beacon that basically you're sinking. So they scared the daylights out of some of the friends down here because they got a call that, hey, this emergency beacon went off. Are they out at sea? And so things like that happen. And there's another situation. They just, we're just going to go and we'll be fine.
Yeah, not experienced sailors, number one. Number two, they didn't adjust their sails when the winds changed. We did. We still had a little bit of damage because the winds were so strong. Yeah. But, we didn't shred our sails or, basically lose the ability to use them. And these folks also lost their dinghy. Weren't they towing it?
Yeah.
Which we learned on our trip around, you never tow a dinghy long distance. No. And even short distance, sometimes it's not such a good idea. Never fails, right?
Yeah.
And so that was gone. It was a beautiful little, cute little dinghy that was lost. And then they ran out of fuel because they didn't have the wherewithal to be able to use a sail. We were concerned about running out of fuel. Tom said, we were about halfway, and he said, I want to turn back. And it's like, well, we're halfway there. Like, no. And we had a situation. The fuel dock hose wasn't long enough when we left, so we weren't completely full, which in hindsight was a big mistake. We should have made sure that our tanks were topped off. But we were able to sail the whole way. We finally got into the dry Tortugas after those, other 60 nautical miles. But we still had a whole overnight sail left. And thankfully, the south wind that was predicted, that we expected the whole way, kicked in and actually pushed us all the way north to Fort Myers. Yeah. And we were able to get into port and only had to use enough fuel to charge the batteries, basically.
Yeah. But another thing happened was we had a transfer pump that pumps from the main tanks down below up to one of the day tanks, and it failed. And so, but I managed to patch a pump together to get that. But yeah, there was a few struggles, which just happens. And
it's really an analogy to life, right? I mean, you make your plan, you prepare, and it's important that you do that because, as Captain Ron says, if it's going to break, it's going to break out there, right? Yeah. and so really kind of expecting it. That's why we have a lot of spare parts on board, right? Mm-hmm. And there are no plumbers and engineers at sea except on my boat. So I'm very, very blessed with that. Yeah. But still, there's certain amount of technical know-how that it's wise to have or have somebody on board if it's not you. And one of the decisions we made on this last trip was, Tom is 71. I'm going to be 62 this year. And we said, gosh, this boat, it's a 30-ton vessel. It's getting a little bit big for us. Yeah. So we kind of made the decision that if we do a long journey like this again, we'll have at least one crewman aboard to be able to help out, because things can get nasty, just like in real life. Yeah. Real quick, things can change on a dime. And what have you done to prepare for the inevitable storms that come? Because they certainly will.
Yes, and when the storms do come in your life, you have to be a strong leader and make good, educated decisions about everything. Because even on a boat, you're responsible for all the lives on that boat, and so it's kind of important that you take it seriously. It's not just a joyride.
Oh, one more thing I think we should add is, since we are in the first quarter topic of health, talk about some of the things that we did. Because there are no doctors at sea when we left.
Oh, well, she went. We went and got a bunch of. What did we get? We got
stainless steel staples, surgical steel.
Yeah, staples.
Thankfully we never had to use them. Yeah. But if you need stitches, if you hurt yourself,
right?
And we also had the big blood clotter patches in case there was a bad wound. And, because if you're out there, if you're, 50, 100 miles offshore, which we were at times, and something happens, you can't just call 911.
No.
Right. And so having those things in place.
Part of the education.
We ended up with hepatitis A. And didn't know what it was for the longest time. And then thankfully there was a fellow cruiser who was a nurse that was able to diagnose what was wrong. And as it turns out, there's really no treatment. We were 2-hour bus ride away from a hospital and said, is it worth it? And she said, well, basically all they could do is give you a blood test and say, yep, that's what you have. So we ended up contacting a doctor friend of ours in California that was really into herbal remedies and holistic treatments. And we were able to also find a lot of information on the internet, saltwater flush.
Oh, that was not fun.
To be able to flush your system from the toxins. But at any rate, you have to be smart about these things and be ready for things that come up. And thankfully, we didn't have anything worse than that. It took us out a little bit, but we were able to but we still continue our trip and not.
But it was pretty scary when you're out at sea and you get weak and But we didn't know what was wrong at first. But it was something I ate in El Salvador. It was bad, and so we didn't know what it was until we got down to Costa Rica and talked to this nurse, and so at least we had a plan as to what to do next. So that was kind of handy. And so we were we lost quite a bit of weight.
I had done a weight loss plan before that. And then, boy, I think that was about the thinnest I had been in many, many years after that interesting weight loss program. But, and I don't recommend it.
No.
But anyway, I think that's all we have for today. Is there anything else that you had that you wanted to mention?
No, just that we always planned way ahead and educated ourselves and did everything we could to take all the guesswork out of it. And still, even though we plan, something silly comes up and you don't, this fuel hose isn't long enough to reach over there. And, just the unforeseen, you just have to look ahead and look past the unforeseen and for success.
But planning and preparation and being a good navigator in your life can certainly save it.
Yes, it can. That was fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the Life in Paradise podcast. Did you love this episode? If so, we'd love for you to follow, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We invite you to tune in every week for more inspired insights and wisdom to create your Somebody Pinch Me reality. And until next time, dream big and act on it daily.